Good morning, everybody. Good morning. This morning's Haftorah is on the book of Ovadya. Who was Ovadya? First and foremost, Ovadya was a convert. He was a convert to Judaism. He came from the nation of Edom. Edom is the Haftorah that we speak about today, the demise of Edom. And the progenitor of Edom was Esav, the brother of Jacob that we talk about in this week's portion of Vayishlach. And the Gemara asks in Sanhedrin, why is it that Ovadya is the one that prophesies the demise and the destruction of the nation of Edom? Says the Gemara, page 39b, because we know in the forest, if you have a tree and you want to knock down a tree, you want to cut down a tree, you take an axe. And an axe is made up of wood. You have the wooden handle, and then you use that wooden handle to knock down the tree. And the Gemara says the same is true with Edom. To knock down Edom, you need Edom. You need an Edomite, which is a Ovadya. And through this, Ovadya speaks about the demise of the nation of Edom. Furthermore, in the time of the king Achav and his wife, the queen Izebel, the wicked queen, who persecuted and killed many prophets in her day, Ovadya saved 100 prophets. He put away 50 in one cave, 50 in the other cave, and he gave them food and protection. And because of this, Ovadya went into terrible debt. But says the Gemara that in the merit of hiding and protecting and saving the lives of these prophets, Ovadya himself became a prophet. He was a disciple of Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet. And so Ovadya is now prophesying here in this week's Torah portion. We mentioned Ovadya already earlier in the portion of Vayera. At the end of Vayera, when we read the Haftorah there's the famous story of Isha Achas, the woman who goes to Elisha, and she cries out and says, my husband died, and they want to take away my children as collateral. Who was the husband that died? That was Ovadya. So we already touched upon Ovadya earlier, but now we hear the prophecy of Ovadya directly in the Haftorah of Ovadya, which is only one chapter, and this is the antithesis of this week's Torah portion of Vayishlach. Just to give you a historic perspective, Ovadya passed away in the year 3043 on the Hebrew calendar. And that is when Elisha took over after the passing of Eliyahu Navi, and he is the one that helped the wife of Ovadya by telling her to take a cruse of oil and filling up all the pots, etc., etc. So this is the background of Ovadya. It begins with Chazon Ovadya. What is the connection between the Haftorah and the parshah? We know that the word Haftorah means the end. It is the end of the parshah. It is also the end of the history of the parshah, because by speaking on the Haftorah of Chazon Ovadya, the Haftorah is telling us that the parshah and the rivalry between Yaakov and Esav is not simply a rivalry of siblings, but rather it is a clash of civilizations. And this is what we are dealing with over here, the clash of civilizations. If we look into verse number 18, there it says, V'haya beis Yaakov eish, u'beis Yosef lahava, and it shall be that the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph will be to a flame. U'beis Esav lakash, and then the house of Esav will turn into stubble. In other words, for Yaakov to totally eliminate Esav, he needed Joseph to be born, because Yaakov was only the fire. Yosef, however, was the flame. And therefore, to destroy Esav, you needed Yosef. What does that mean? So my grandfather, Rabbi Jacob J. Hechter, blessed memory, once said that base Yaakov Eish, fire, is also the acronym for Ahavas Shalom. And that is when Jews are united, when there's love and peace amongst one another, then the house of Joseph becomes a flame and has the ability to eliminate all the enemies of the Jewish people. To take it on a more Hasidic level, being that this coming Shabbos is the 19th of Kislev, and the 19th of Kislev is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. It was the day that the Alter Rebbe, Rav Shei Zalman of Liadi, was redeemed from Tsarist prison. And the Alter Rebbe is compared to Yaakov, because when we talk about the Ushpizim, the guests that come to the house, or the Sukkah, each night of the holiday of Sukkot, so the first night there is Avram, the second night is Yitzchak, the third night is Yaakov, and similarly there is the Hasidic Ushpizim. The first night the Baal Shem Tov, the second night the Magi, the third night the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was similar to Yaakov in the sense that Yaakov was Ish Tam Yoshev Oyolim. Yaakov sat in the tent of Torah, and the tents of Torah, implying the revealed Torah and also the hidden Torah. Similarly, the Alter Rebbe was called the Shnei Or, the two lights, for he revealed also the revealed Torah and the hidden Torah. So we have base Yaakov Eish, the house of Jacob. The Alter Rebbe introduced Hasidism to the world, and as the Rebbe Rashab said that on Yutes Kislev began the transformation and the fixing of the world of Tohu, which is the world of chaos, the world of Esav. So it was from the 19th of Kislev, when the Alter Rebbe came out of prison. On this day, do we have the tools to be able to transform Esav and to fix Esav and to transform the world of chaos, which is the progenitor of Esav and Edom. But when we continue along the history and the lineage of Chabad, you come to the house of Joseph, who was the sixth Chabad Rebbe. And he was Lahava. His house turned into a flame because the Frierdiker Rebbe, and continued with our Rebbe, sent out shluchim throughout the entire world. And by doing so, they brought about this tremendous transformation, this tremendous flame and resurgence and fervor and passion and gusto in the teachings of Chassidus, which has the ability to bring about the revelation of Mashiach and the transformation of darkness into light. And this continues with the next verse, and that it says when Mashiach will come, that the Jewish people will come from France and they will go to the southern cities of Israel. And ultimately, they will judge Esav. And they will judge the mountain of Esav. Because Esav will ultimately be transformed. Not will he be destroyed, but rather ultimately he will be transformed. Who is Esav? Esav is Rome, as we'll soon see. And this all begins with the ability to learn Chassidus and to teach Chassidus and to spread Chassidus. And this continues with Tzarfat. Number one is in France today you have a beautiful yeshiva. There's a tremendous resurgence of Yiddishkeit and the teachings of Chassidus. But also Tzarfat equals 770. It is through 770, which was the headquarters of Chabad, that the teachings of Chassidism spread forth throughout the entire world. This is the continuation of Yutes Kislev. Furthermore, the name or word 770, besides being the address for the headquarters, alludes to the 7 emotions that each person has. We have 7 animalistic emotions, and this needs to be transformed. and you have 7 times 10, which is each emotion, each midah, each attribute has 10 levels in it. And then you have 7 times 100, because when you actually begin to analyze and to transform this emotion, you realize there are many layers and many levels to this emotion. So to totally transform these 7 emotions, which is the Esav inside of us, which is the Edom inside of us, which is the Rome inside of us. By doing so, we are transforming, and we become now 770, which is Paratzta Ufaratzta, the slogan of Chabad, which means to spread forth throughout all 4 corners of the world, to breach all limitations, personal limitations, and even godly limitations. And that is to accomplish new things, and to persevere, and to acquire new heights and new accomplishments. And this is the meaning why Ovadya is only 1 chapter. It is the only prophet in the book of prophets that has 1 chapter, 1 Pedic, because it underscores the objective of Ovadya, which is to bring a oneness into the world between Yaakov and Esav, between Torah and world, between Israel and all the nations of the world. And that all of them, as we conclude in the Haftorah, V'hoisa laHashem hamlucha, that God will be king, and all the nations of the world will acknowledge that there is only one God, and He is truly the king over the entire world, over the entire universe, over all humankind, over all creations, and all planets, and angels, and worlds. And this sheds some light on the parshah. On the parshah, we conclude the parshah with talking about the lineage of Esav, and the children of Esav, and the kings of Esav. And the 2 final chieftains are Magdiel and Iram. And the Torah says that the second to the final chieftain is Magdiel. Who is Magdiel? Says Rashi, Magdiel is Rome. That is Magdiel. So already Rashi is telling us that when the Torah speaks about Magdiel, he is referring to Rome. Why is Rome called Magdiel? Says the Ramban, says Nachmanides, because Magdiel represents a tower, like Migdol, and large and great, because this will be a nation that will exalt itself over all other nations and over all other gods. And this is who Rome is. It represents defiance. It represents arrogance. And yet, this, says the Haftorah, Ovadya, will totally be destroyed. But in addition to this, there is Aluf Iram. There's one more king, one more chieftain that comes after Rome. Who is that? Says the Medrash that the word Iram represents a king who will arise from Rome and will gather all the treasures of the world, all the treasures of Rome, and bring it to the Melech HaMashiach, and will bring these treasures to the Messiah, to Mashiach. In other words, there are 2 stages to Rome. The first destruction. The first stage is destruction, to destroy this Roman Empire, the arrogance and their destructive qualities. The second aspect is to take their raw materials, to take the chaotic light and energy that they possess and transform it and channel it into Kedusha, into holiness. So this is really the stage in which we find ourselves right now, because we already experienced Rome in its height. We already experienced Rome in its destructive manner when it destroyed the Second Holy Temple in the 70 of Common Era. And now we look at Rome in another light. We look at Rome as the West. However, now the objective is to transform the West, to use all of these raw materials and all the riches, the physical material riches and the spiritual riches, to compile all of this and to gather all of this and to present this to Melech HaMashiach, which means to use this for the sake of God, for ethics, for values, for unity, and for spirituality. So this is the Haftorah in just one chapter. It's the Haftorah in just a nutshell. The Haftorah is one chapter. It's all about unifying the entire world, to use all the raw materials of Esav, and therefore V'olu Mashiach Bahar Tzion Lishbeit is Har Esav. It's going to be the mountain of Esav, because Esav is going to be elevated. It's going to be refined. It's going to be transformed, and it's going to be used to serve Almighty God. And this is also the mnemonic of the parshah. It is all about the objective of the parshah. It's all about taking Esav, who is the clash of civilization, and transforming it into Yaakov, transforming it into positive energy, and using all of these potentials that we possess in our life to serve Almighty God. And so to end with a story that I heard recently from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom, and he says that there was a woman by the name of Suzanne. And this woman, Suzanne, lived in Curacao. And she had an art and boutique gallery. And when the cruise ships would land there in Curacao, she would make a lot of money, a lot of business, because all of these wealthy people came off the cruise ship and they were in the mood of shopping. That's what you do on vacation. You buy and you shop. And she came into this store, a woman who was dressed very fancy. You can see she had a lot of money. And she turned to the owner of the store and she said, Suzanne, I would like to buy a pair of shoes. Do you sell shoes here? Yes, we sell shoes here. Well, I'm looking for a specific designer, a French designer. Really? What is the name of the French designer? The French designer is Monsieur Damager. Monsieur Damager. Suzanne was very well known, and she frequented all of these designers, and yet she was not familiar with Monsieur Damager. She says, excuse me, ma'am, if you don't mind, could you show me the shoes from Monsieur Damager so I'll be able to get you a similar pair? And the woman takes off her shoe and she gives it to Suzanne. And Suzanne begins to look at the shoe and she turns it upside down, and on the sole of the shoe it says damaged. It says damaged, and by the fact that she was walking with the shoe, the D of the damage became erased. And so it was damagé. And Suzanne said, oh, these shoes from Monsieur Damager? Sure, I can get you a pair like this as well. This is the story that Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs tells. What is the lesson of the story? In each and every one of our lives, we have this Monsieur Damager. We have something which is damaged. We have damaged goods. And very often God gifts us and He creates us with this damage, this imperfection, this flaw. And the question is, what do we do with this flaw? How do we handle this damage? Do we erase the D in the damaged? And do we transform this damaged shoe into Monsieur Damager? And this is really what Chazon Ovadya is all about. That's what the parshah is all about. As Hasidus explains that Yitzchak gave Yaakov the blessings, because it was only through Yaakov that we have the ability to transform the Esav. Yes, we have damaged goods, we have flaws, we have a lot of chaotic energy in our bodies. But through Yaakov, through the study of Torah, through accepting God as our God and as our King, we have the tools and we have the capacity to truly transform Esav, to transform Edom, to transform Rome, and to transform even Monsieur Damager, to truly bring about the best in us and the greatest qualities and our true perfection. So we hope and pray that this will be an end to Golos, an end to exile. being that we already experienced all the terrible damage and destruction in the world through Rome. And now we hope and pray to enter into the ultimate stage 2, which is through Aluf Iram, through the chieftain of Iram, which will bring about and usher in the Geula through the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.